if your legacy could be created while you are alive and could be more than what you just give to your family. I have the pleasure of introducing you to Anna Njai Conte. She joins us today from New York City. Welcome, Anna. It is my pleasure to host you. I had shared with you over email that I had reached out. You were in an article on the financial planning website, and it talked about how you're the co-founder of a New York-based firm, Re-Envision Wealth, which launched in June with the goal of being the first Black-owned RIA, which is the Registered Investment Advisory acronym, with $1 billion in client assets. And you wanted to break through this disillusionment with helping high net worth clients just accumulate more wealth if that's the only reference point they have. So I thought, why not invite you on and have you say more? Because I also think a legacy is more than just maybe what fits inside of a box and what we're used to in regards to the status quo.
Doesn't come from the traditional advisor backgrounds, but has worked with wealthy folks for 15 years now, and I feel very strongly that wealth has the power to move mountains and really impact change. But it's up to us to, I think, reframe our relationship to our wealth and our money.
Oh, that's deep. So I know that this article shared you're a first generation American with parents from Puerto Rico and Gambia, and it was completely accidental when you entered the world of wealth management. So how did you find finance? I thought maybe we could start there with the icebreaker for the listeners.
Of course. So, I graduated college. I had the plan, or I was guided by my very well-intentioned father to, study literature and then become a lawyer, because he thought you study literature, you'll be very well read, you'll know how to write well and articulate your ideas in a written form very well. And I just discovered that that wasn't something for me. I really wanted to feel as though I was having more of an impact and helping folks more. I thought I would, go into the nonprofit or NGO space. I'm fluent in several languages, and just by dint of my background, thought international living or international affairs would be really appealing to me. I got a call from a recruiter shortly after graduating, and said, we have this assistant position at a wealth management firm in New York City, and we thought you'd be great for it. I went for the interview, got it, and here we are, nearly 15 years later. I'm still in the business. So it was really accidental. And, I'll say that it was a huge culture shock to me to, go from, even though I went to good schools my whole life, I went to college at NYU. So it's not as if I was totally isolated from that world, but anybody who knows New York City knows that, you can have folks that are ultra wealthy and folks that are, just barely making ends meet or not making ends meet on the same train in the same, job. It's a very interesting dynamic. And so that really just opened my eyes to so much of what was happening outside of the realm of anybody that I knew. And so, I spent 8 years working in wealth management, really working with ultra high net worth folks on the planning side of things. So, obviously investments is a huge piece of what any wealth manager does, but not necessarily focused on the tactical portfolio management, but thinking about estate planning and tax planning, retirement planning, education, and legacy planning for them. And what I noticed was that I felt as though I was not really having much of an impact. I was helping the folks I was working with quite a bit, and giving them clarity and really going above and beyond and giving them that good service, but it felt empty. And so I launched my own practice and merged with my partner last year, and the rest is history.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful story. And I know one of the insights this article mentioned, and then I'm going to go back to some of the questions I have written down for you. One of the highlights it brought up is some advisors are getting tired of helping another millionaire pay a little less on taxes and have a little more in exchange for a bit better pay. And I thought about, even in the world of high net worth clients, I mean, affluent individuals are still individuals. They still want connection and meaning in their life, and someone to look at them as more than just their checkbook or their pocketbook, or yeah, they'd like to
Absolutely.
fill in some of their life. But I know that one of the things you've also shared is even though you didn't grow up, let's say, around golf clubs or country clubs, you have a heart for women, especially millennials and minorities, and seeing other women do well. And you had moved from the DC area to New York City. And I thought there must have also been a mindset shift to say, like I think you had mentioned on a previous podcast, it was very important for you to have somebody that you could see doing it. Like it was one thing when you read somebody's portfolio and you were like, wow, look at all those zeros and commas. I didn't know that was possible. And then also to say, what if I could see somebody that looks like me or that I could relate to? And then that brings this idea up of it's possible for me. Like it's possible for me to accumulate wealth, but it's also possible for me, let's say, to design a legacy. So would you speak more about that mindset bit?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting thing and one that I feel very passionately about because, in my work, obviously there are folks who are multi-generational wealthy and they're, heirs and heiresses, but there are other folks who are just, start a business or just really diligent savers and investors and they get to retirement and they have amassed a nice nest egg. And interacting with those folks and realizing that that was just something that was a matter of habits and diligence was really game changing for me. And I think the common thread in everything that you shared is sometimes it just takes someone planting the seed of possibility in your mind to open up the world for you. And I think, for me, we have two main client types. I'll talk a little bit about this at Re-Envision Wealth. One is sort of that first gen wealth building affluent person who, maybe has become a doctor or a lawyer or has started a business and been very successful, but they've made leaps and bounds from a socioeconomic standpoint. And so there's a lot of learning that needs to happen in terms of, how does the tax code work? How do we structure an estate plan? How do we do sort of multi-year tax and financial planning to support a very intentional life plan? And when you come from a background where you are just focused on the day-to-day, week to week, month to month, that's a skill that you need to learn. And there's a whole new vocabulary and set of practices that you need to put in place there. And my goal is really just to help them see how that, ongoing investment account contributions, how those ongoing, intentional structures are going to get them to that place. On the flip side, we also have another set of clients that are already very wealthy, and they could be, once again, heirs, or they might have been the first gen. So, you think first gen, second gen, third gen wealthy, it doesn't really matter. But they're very focused on what their legacy or what their assets can do for the world and how they can drive impact now and at death through the wealth that they've amassed. And, now it's not just a function of philanthropic giving, which is obviously a huge part of what they do, or political giving, which is a huge part of what they do, but it's also about like the type of investments that they do. So my partner focuses a lot on impact investing. And so we do a lot of really deep impact investing work with our clients that is done in the context of that overall kind of vision that they have long term for their wealth and the type of world they want to see and the type of legacy they even want to create within their whole family, right? It's a very cohesive plan that is allowing them to see the impact and the progress now and in future. And our goal is to take this nebulous idea with them of this change and really show them what the path is to get there. And I think, having conversations like these is really important so that someone who does have wealth and might have a feeling that they're not doing as good as they can in the world right now with that money, like this just plants the seed for them to ask different questions and to have a different perspective on that wealth.
Yes, and raise their minimum standards.
That too. Oh, that too. I mean,
yeah.
So let's talk about minimum standards, right? Because I think, that's a huge part of why I went independent and why I want to focus on women in particular is because I think women, it's a crazy thing to say in 2024 that, women are half the population and we're still trying to convince people in financial services and wealth managers that it's a viable career or niche to work with women or to work mostly with women or to help women and create a service offering that uniquely caters to their needs, but that's where we are. And it's something that, because of my upbringing, is very near and dear to my heart, for women to be financially empowered and have their own money, and feel like they have agency to decide where their wealth is, and what it's doing.
Yes. Well, I think it's interesting. I think women are the new profile, and financial houses are trying to figure out how do they shift so that they can meet that woman where she's at. So whatever question she has isn't belittled or she's not made to feel like, because a lot of times, and I think you've talked about this, sometimes they'll turn to the guy, and other times maybe the wife will make the decisions. But when, let's say, more single women are doing well, now that's a new demographic, and how is that embraced compared to ignored, or it's like, well, we don't want to touch the pink elephant in the room. So I want to bring up one point before we talk about how women are kind of the new avatar, especially women who are in the context of family businesses, or they're starting their own business. They're an entrepreneur, like you had said, that maybe they're a physician or some type of profession, whether it's an accountant, an attorney, something that does well, and they're accumulating income, but they're just not knowing yet how to parlay that into something that can grow. And you've talked about words that maybe women don't use every day, like dividends or capital accumulation. And so I think that's wonderful. So we're going to get to that in a moment. But I want to shift back for a moment to women who, whether they're a woman of color, whether that's Black, brown, Asian, whatever, East Indian, Southeast Asia, etc. You brought up this really great point, and I thought this was worth exploring with you for a moment, because especially if 2/3 of today's high net worth are self-made. So you brought up a point where economic problems are sometimes, I think the phrase was economic problems with social consequences. And so sometimes if a woman can have a little bit more money, she can stand up to power. She can stand up and have more choices. She can live into her dreams and not stay with limited choices, especially if, let's say, she's a single mom and she's had to make difficult choices where the lack of money meant that she missed out. Would you say more about that? Because I think that's one of those things that's like, again, an invisible elephant in the room of what money can do when it gets organized and structured right.
Yeah, I think that so many women are socialized not to think about money, not to prioritize money, not to focus on it. And, there are all kind of psychological and social surveys that talk about how from a very young age, like, boys are talked to more about money and finances than girls are, even within the same household. And I think that what that leads us to is women not necessarily feeling as though they should be making those decisions. And so they don't necessarily focus on it or think about it too much. And what that does is it puts us in a really precarious position where someone else is making the decisions for us. And that could be a parent, it could be a spouse, it could be a financial advisor. It just, if someone is making the decisions without necessarily considering our point of view, or without us having a good understanding of what is happening with our finances and our wealth.
And what all the words mean.
Yeah, and what all the words mean. And so then, you get to a point where you're an adult and nobody's talked to you about investing, and then you get your first job, and you have to sign up for 401k, or you start a business and now you have to figure out estimated tax payments, and how do you set up that? You might have figured it out when you had a job, but how do you set up those retirement plans as a self-employed or an entrepreneurial person? And it's just there's an added level of complexity, and I think a real opportunity for women to lean into that and to have a lot more agency and decision-making power in their life as a result. I think there's something, even if you're happily married or happily in a long-term partnership, there's something so important and empowering around you understanding what's happening with your money and understanding all of that. Now we're very fortunate that social media, while it has its minuses, it also has its pluses, in that it's made information very readily available for anybody who is looking to learn more about investing and taxes and retirement planning and estate planning. There are great podcasts like this where folks can learn more and be more savvy with that, and ideally, build wealth and some financial autonomy for themselves too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just being exposed to these conversations can plant seeds. Another great point that you made on a prior podcast is this idea of setting up saving and investing accounts so they start to go on autopilot. So whether somebody is in their 20s or their 30s or their 40s, and as we know, adult life slips by and it feels like
Mhm.
15 seconds since like college graduation or something like that, where these small habits can make a big difference. But if somebody didn't have, let's say, a family member, then they might not know to do that.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think, I'm so passionate about this because I know that so much of my own financial comfort now comes from the fact that I was exposed to this early on in my career. So, I was 22 years old and learning about investing, and all of this money talk around me constantly prompted me to think about it quite a bit and to be very intentional about it. Not everyone is so lucky. And I think that that's why it's very important for those of us that have the knowledge and the understanding and the perspective to share that publicly, in a very real way. I think we have the responsibility and obligation to do that because we don't know who's listening and who might take that one small action that might feel terrifying to them. It's small in perspective, in my own perspective, but it's a big step for someone to open that investment account, outside of their workplace retirement plan, or to up their retirement contributions, or to you know um, put money aside to buy an investment property. Like whatever the step is that they're taking, it's a small step that has a monumental long term impact if it's consistent.
Yeah. I mean, somebody works so hard their entire life and to come to the end of it and to have thought this through, whether it's the power of compounding, oh, they'll feel so much better. They'll feel so much better and so thankful that somebody told them about this. I think there's also a power, what I call power to the invitation. So even let's say if I ask somebody, what would you like your legacy to be, especially a woman, just asking that question in and of itself means that the answer matters. So let's say that you are approaching women of color, let's say between the ages of 30 and 50. And if you're asking them, hey, would you like to learn more about financial literacy and wealth building? It means that their opinion matters, that their answer matters, that their account matters, and they don't get just brushed aside as if they're invisible.
Absolutely. I think that that brings up a great point is, a lot of time, a lot of us, because of the makeup of the financial services industry, like from a gender standpoint, from an age standpoint, from a racial standpoint, whatever, gender identity, like all of that is so woefully not diverse. I think we discount the fact that just acknowledging someone in a very human way that is a little bit different has such an incredible impact on them long term. It really allows them to, I guess, shift their perspective and their identity as someone who needs to think about legacy, who needs to think about investing, who has the option to do that. And because there's such a lack of diversity, right? If I'm a 40-year-old doctor of South Asian descent, I'm probably not seeing a female doctor. I'm probably not seeing many advisors who look like me, or and so maybe I'm thinking, oh, this I probably don't need to be there because it doesn't belong to me. Like that's not a space I
Ooh,
belong in. When it is really a space that you belong in, it's just that the space has not caught up with what the rest of the country looks like, unfortunately.
yeah, that's a powerful distinction right there. There's and I'm just going to speak openly, and many of my listeners, actually about 80% of my listeners are male, but they've got mothers and sisters and daughters and so forth. So I think that having this conversation openly, great, let's be transparent about it. So yes, I think a lot of times when you brought up the B word, belonging, if somebody isn't asked, if they're not invited, then they might not push. They might not make that proactive telephone call to um, think that a new world could be possible for them, or to claim personal agency in that world, or to start focusing energy of what could be possible. It just kind of gets skipped over. And it's one thing to save money in a savings account, but it's another thing to diversify it and learn about ETFs, or I think you brought up SEP IRAs, or just a level of diversification that can really protect them if one thing goes south. And then they know that all the hard work that they did is, again, protected, and that somebody wants to protect it. that they're not just isolated out there alone.
Absolutely, absolutely. It can be really hard to have those conversations. You might want to and not necessarily know who to have those conversations with, especially because for most people, money is a topic that is a little awkward to bring up and it's a little awkward to discuss. It's like, like politics, religion, you don't discuss it in polite company. Um, that's the habit that many of us have engendered. And I think having more of those conversations and giving folks the permission to have those conversations is really, really powerful and important.
Yeah, in the space. So it's interesting regarding millennials because I would think that oftentimes they are breaking through barriers. They want to work from home. They don't want to stand for less. They're questioning their company, and I think all of that is just brilliant. And but I thought I might shift it back to you for a moment. How do you relate to money, and how has your journey been from that of your childhood to the college years to 2019? I think was when you late 2019 when you started your firm.
Yeah. Cool. It's definitely been a transformative journey. I would say, I grew up with parents who were educated. So, I am not a first gen college grad in my family, but my parents are new to this country and new to this system and new to how everything works here. And, that was a big shock. And so there was a lot of financial illiteracy that went on with them. And I think, my parents kind of succumbed to this idea of, reaching for this big, like, lifestyle jump or American dream or like providing a standard of living that they really wanted to give us, but didn't necessarily have the ability to do so. And, that I understand the inclination there. I think, but they struggled a lot when I was young. I think because of some of those choices. And, for me, I grew up with a lot of financial stress. It wasn't the type of where I was worried about whether I was going to eat or not. It wasn't, like we had eviction notices at the door, but my parents did have 2 or 3 jobs my whole childhood. And so each, and so, it was very clear that money was a stressor. And so for me, I left that thinking, okay, I have to figure this stuff out and I have to do better um, in order to, not pass on some of those stressors to my kids. Because I always knew that, that was one of the cycles that I really wanted to break. It's a long slug and it's a very difficult thing, even though, I have a husband who I've been married to for a long time. I married on the younger side, and he's also very committed to, building a level of financial stability for ourselves and for our family. So that makes it easy. I think we were both really committed to that and moving in the same direction. But, when you're starting from scratch or you're starting in a hole, it takes a really long time and it takes a huge level of commitment to continue to make those good decisions and continue to make those contributions and continue to take bets on yourself when you don't necessarily know that it's going to pay off. You don't have that evidence. um, it's only probably, I would say, in the last like 4 years that I've really felt like I can see the fruits of that labor and feel like I can take a deep breath. Now, I'm not someone who settles for good enough. I'm not. That's not woven into my DNA or my makeup as a person. But I'm immensely proud of the level of work and turnaround that we have in our family and we've done in the last, let's say, 15 years. And I'm very grateful that I did put in that work on the front end, because what it allowed me to do was to leave my job and, you know, have a very uncertain income, not make retirement contributions for a while, and know that that was not going to sink me financially. Like that's a gift that no one gave me, but I was very grateful that we had really leaned into building some stability for ourselves to be able to buy those options. And now I just feel super blessed that I can provide a standard of living to my kids, and they have no idea. We talk about money, but they're not ever worried about it. They understand that it's more a decision, like spending and investing decisions are more about what's a priority for us right now than, you know, scrounging for change in the car to pay for something.
Yeah. I'm hearing almost that it went from money was a stressor in how you related to money to now today money is a fuel or a tool.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
exactly.
a big change from like survival to being able to, buy the little things, the backpacks or the school trips and not have to sweat it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And to have the choice around it. Like I know you brought up in a prior podcast that sometimes schools will bring up, well, let's pick a stock today, but then they don't go beyond that. But even just to have that conversation, let's say with your children is a privilege. It's eye opening compared to
For sure.
more than just we have to clip coupons today. It's like,
Oh, for sure.
yeah, let's
And
break
I
out the
mean,
Wall Street Journal.
it's just such a departure. So recently, my husband really likes real estate, and so we recently bought an investment property when in January, so just 2 months ago. And we're setting it up as a midterm rental. And I took my daughters with me to get the place fixed up, and we had contractors painting, and they helped me pick out the furniture for it and like design it. And they talked to me a lot about like, okay, who's staying at the condo now, and who's how much money did you make, or how many days are they staying, and what are you charging? And like the level of conversation is so different for them than it was for me. And I'm immensely grateful once again to myself and my husband for putting in that work to be able to show them a different relationship to money. And my hope is that, they continue to just build on that and do better than we were able to do with the tools and the perspective that they're able to have as well.
Yeah, I think it's lovely. And also just being able to talk about it today, both from the emotional standpoint of the feelings that come up, but also the logical aspects of the day to day. Like these are new conversations and new things that we're being exposed to. And yeah, it's I think it's just awesome. Okay. So I also wanted to bring up, so if I circle back to the industry, this idea of changing demographics and how today's institutions then can give that quality of advice and understanding the needs, let's say, of women of color for customized services. I think you brought up that perhaps it's even just within the Black American community, it's a $60 billion niche. Say more.
Oh, I mean, it's this fascinating thing. So where, my industry is having a conversation or having conversations that don't at all are not with people that look like what the majority of the country looks like, and do not reflect the reality of many people. And so it's like an echo chamber. It's like this little bubble. And every time I step into that bubble, I'm always shocked at just how out of touch it is to the reality, right? So as a Black woman, as a Latina, I see this immense opportunity as a woman. I see this immense opportunity to serve people in a different way, to serve different groups of people in a different way, besides the same, tried and true, boring business model. And I think it's just such a shame that we are so hyper focused on like the assets under management model and strictly focused on investable assets. I had a conversation with a prospect the other day where it was, the parents are nearing retirement. They're immigrants to the company. They're Latinos. The parents don't speak great English. They speak enough English to get by, but to have really deep like financial conversations is going to be a struggle for them to have that in English. The kids and they have several, dozens of rental properties and a very profitable multi-7-figure business that they are looking to pass to their kids. And so they need some help with retirement planning and figuring out their social security strategy and figuring out how to transition and do a succession plan for this business to their children, and figuring out a strategy for their rental properties and their estate plan and tax planning as they're, nearing the last 2 to 3 years of until their retirement. And they're not folks with a huge liquid portfolio, but they are multimillionaires. And yet my industry, because they don't have many Latinos or people that are Spanish speakers because they don't have many people that are able to work with folks that don't have a large liquid investment portfolio. They're giving up what I would say would be very good clients, and our business focuses a lot on like the stickiness or the longevity of relationships, and developing relationships with people that are going to be, many years long, lifelong relationships. And I couldn't help but think in this conversation that, if you help a family successfully transition all of this, and let these parents who have worked their fingers to the bone for decades to live comfortably in retirement, let their kids continue to have an asset, and build on this asset base, and have a very viable, like, family business, well-run family business. Like, those are clients for life. Those kids were in their early 30s. They could be they could be my clients for the next 30 years. And they're both great professionals and have this solid base. And so all of this to say is an example of the types of people that are being ignored by our industry that are all have the potential to be excellent clients. If we're willing to let other folks into the decision-making chamber or decision-making rooms and talk through alternative business models and talk through alternative compensation structures, I think that we'll have a much richer industry. But until we're willing to do that, it's not a pretty picture from my vantage point.
Well, that's why firms like yours exist.
Exactly. And it's like, folks come to us and they're like, you don't know how hard I had to look to find somebody who, was independent and
receptive.
was a CFP and could help, had a business model that would allow me to access their services.
Yeah, I think, again, this is why this is an important conversation. And when I think about legacy, I've made it a point to invite lots of different guests onto this platform so that people can see that legacy isn't just for somebody who's rich or famous, or it's not just like one thing. It's accessible to all of us, and we all come from somewhere, and we all have a dream in our heart, and we can all make a beautiful legacy, and not just think that we have to stay within a box because there's not an invitation being extended. And so, yes, and you've also made a point that ethnic minority babies are being born more and more, and 40% of wealth now is being managed by women. Say more.
Yeah. It's just there are demographic trends that are hitting our country, that are in motion, that are not going to change. And it's to our own detriment if we are not willing to adjust and be adaptable. I think the way of the future is a much different firm. I think it's going to have to be like much more comprehensive in terms of the services. I think folks should demand much more of their wealth advisor or their financial advisor than they have in the past. It's not just investment management. Like, they should be doing tax planning for you and potentially tax preparation. There are lots of firms that will do all of that and, help you with financing and help you with insurance needs, and really just be much more comprehensive. And that's going to just continue to grow, I think, as the needs of the population and the expectations of different generations also shift.
Yeah, I think also the internet was kind of a great equalizer, because if somebody went to the internet, it's the customer on the other side of Amazon or whoever was buying didn't care necessarily who was selling. They just clicked the button and bought. And I just think it changed a lot. And it'll be interesting to see where the future goes. So since this is a legacy podcast, I'm curious, what does this word mean to you? And then my second question tied to that is, in one of your prior podcasts, you talked about this idea, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot too much here. You spoke about the idea of a black tax in staying connected in cultural ties, sharing the prosperity while honoring the U.S. system. So I wondered, what would your legacy like your legacy to be?
I think my legacy is just knowing that I died with nothing left to give. And that, can be to my family, knowing that I made the most of my life. I think, tying back to the money theme, there's a lot that I saw my grandmother, my mother not do because, and dreams that they left unfulfilled because of financial limitations or limiting beliefs or very real like societal limitations. And I don't want to have any of those stories. Like, I don't ever want to tell my kids or my grandkids, oh, always wanted to do so and so, and I never did it. I always want to, within reason. I'm a financial advisor. I'm a little conservative when it comes to finances, but like, I want to say, hey, just today, my friend texted me and said, one of our favorite artists is performing in Puerto Rico in December. Do you want to go? And I said, hey, sign me up. Like, I'm going to go. I'll figure it out. I'll move things around. I'll make sure I hit my financial goals, and I'm going to do the things. But I also think, it's just making sure that I've loved very fully, I've lived very fully, and I've shared as much of my own knowledge with as many people as I can.
Yeah, that's lovely. One of your nicknames, before I circle back to ask you what legacy means for you personally, but one of your nicknames, I think you said, was Tasmanian Devil?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, my mother-in-law calls me that. I just have a lot of energy, and I want to do as much as possible. I'm not somebody that wants to leave what I can do today to tomorrow. And so, I get up and I do what I can every day. I give it my all and just try to end the day on E. I usually collapse into bed at the end of the day. In
That's
the best
good.
way.
Yeah, that's good for the energy. Yeah. So what does the word mean personally to you, legacy?
I think it's just like the impact that you want to leave. I think it's a very personal question. But I think it's just like, what's your act of love to the people you care about, or your community, or your local area, like whatever and whoever matters to you. It's having that impact that you want to have on those people. And that can look very different. That's a very personal question. It looks very different person to person, family to family. But I just encourage anybody to think about, like, what do they want to be remembered for? And what do they, I ask clients, like, what are the things you'll regret when you're old and dying, and, or, you're sitting in your rocking chair? Like, what are you going to regret not having done or not having pursued? And that should be your guiding star for your life.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. I know that you've also spoken about this idea of maybe giving back one day in the school system or the curriculum and being able to teach financial literacy.
Yeah, it's something that's really important to me. Like, right now, I'm, I'm balancing building this business while also doing that. So I do actually have a membership community for women where I teach them about financial education. And this is a way for me to have more impact, besides sort of the one-on-one work that I do with my clients. I do think that long term, I want to be a teacher, and I want to help like spread this knowledge, because I know that it just takes that little seed, and it just takes one conversation or one perspective shift or one lesson, and you get somebody early, and that can have an outsized positive impact on their life. And so my goal is, to help work towards that at some point in the future.
Yeah, you could bring the Wall Street Journal and ask some young people, sorry about that, to pick some stocks. And
oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll do that, and then tell them about a budget. And I saw a meme on the internet the other day, and it was like, me asking, how do I prepare my taxes? And then my school system says, oh, just shut up and square dance.
That's awesome. That's so true. Yeah.
I really would love for like young people and young women in particular to understand like what these things mean, and just be very fluent in it, just like how we're fluent in English and we know how to write, and we're very focused on like computer literacy and STEM now. Like, it just needs to be a life skill that we learn early and discuss often, because our parents are not, we know that our parents are not always going to teach us. And relationships to money and thoughts around money start very early. And so the earlier you get kids and the earlier you help them build good habits, the better off that they will be.
Yeah, absolutely. These conversations absolutely matter. And also being exposed to new literature like the Wall Street Journal, financial newspapers, financial magazines, even if you don't understand it the first time, just having that opportunity to open up the pages and
Yeah,
talk to someone about it, compared to feeling like, well, I
absolutely.
walked by the newsstand and I never thought to buy Forbes or Fortune. And it's like, no, this is your invitation today to
Yes.
explore, yeah, what this world is all about. So what would you say are 3 or 4 core values that you would lead with when you think about your legacy vision? I know that part of the vision for your firm is to serve millennials, create financial stability, and provide a good understanding of financing, the psychological challenges to building wealth, and then being able to give it away. But what would you say are 3 or 4 core values
Mm,
that you would like your legacy to stand on?
yeah, I would say impact is definitely one of them. Um, Authenticity is definitely one for me, and excellence
In all you do?
in all I do. My dad taught me very early. I remember I was probably 8 or 9 years old, and he was teaching me how to make my bed, and I was, just kind of doing it half in half measure. And he looked at me and he said, "All right, anything you do in life, you should do it well. If you're not going to do it well, don't do it." Um, and that was a very powerful lesson that stuck with me, and that's what I try to do. If I feel as though I can't do it well, I just won't even try, and I've given up on trying to make myself do well at things that I'm clearly not equipped to or don't want to to try and do well.
Yeah, yeah, that's awesome. Um, so, out of curiosity, who were some of your positive role models? Like, who inspired you?
So many. I'm very fortunate. I have a fantastic family. Um, I think in terms of like overall just being an incredible human, my aunt and uncle were there. They're both dead now, but my mom's sister and her husband, they raised me while my parents were busy working a ton, and they were just the most hardworking, honest, kind people in the world. And whenever I think about like who I want to be like, it's definitely them. Um, as a human. In terms of other folks, I think like my older sister is just the most fabulous, lighthearted person. And I like she's always cracking jokes and making people laugh, and I just admire her, and not in a clowny way, but it's just natural. And so she I always looked up to her in that way. She just has a way of bringing a light to a room. So she's definitely one of those.
Yeah, and sounds like enjoying life well.
Oh, for sure. She knows how to live. That woman, she knows how to live, and she's extremely intentional and authentic in what she does.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. I know one of the things you've also spoken about in prior podcasts is the value of family. Like, you came
Mm.
from a background where family was valued, and you brought your family with you, and you gave back to them, and everyone rose together, like all ships rise together.
Yeah, definitely. I had a very family oriented upbringing. I was, with my grandma. My grandmother took care of me until I went to school. And every day after school, I was at my aunt and uncle's, where my grandmother also lived there. So I was with them every day after school. And I think it was always instilled in me very early that we have to be unified, and we have to be, I guess, a unit, a strong unit, and to really like lock arms and be together in that is going to be like your greatest resource, and your greatest source of strength.
Yeah, family's a beautiful thing, and I think you're speaking into family also is important, because I see sometimes today the family unit is being broken down. So
Mm.
thank you for speaking into family.
Mm.
Yeah. If you were to set aside a weekend or two a month to design a hardcover coffee table book with images, life lessons, quotes, what might be in it? What would fill its pages?
Mm. Oh, so many things. I love different cultures. I love how different cultures are expressed in terms of food and art, beauty standards. Um, I think there's so much value in that, like regardless of the location. I just came back from Mexico. I was in Mexico 2 weeks ago, which is just such a beautiful place. And so I think it would probably center on that. I love good food. I love like cultural idiosyncrasies and things like that. So if I had a coffee table book, that'd probably be it.
Yeah. I love that you notice the details around something that maybe other people skip over because they either take it for granted or they don't necessarily have a personal connection to it. So I think that's great. I think that that's much needed in this world. So yeah. Before I read my closing paragraph, are there any final thoughts that you would like to share, whether it's about what you see out there on the landscape or just any closing thoughts about the subject of legacy in the context of wealth management?
Yeah. I think that, if I had to leave with any thoughts, it would just be that, money is truly just a tool. Um, money, a lot of folks put money or investing or anything financially related as sort of the boogeyman in the closet. And it truly is just an inanimate object. I always use the analogy of, a brick can build a house or it can be thrown through a window and break the window. And so it's really up to the person who's holding it and what their intention is and what their actions are with it that determines kind of what the result is. And so I invite anybody who's listening to this to just think through what role they want money to have in their life and to, be intentional with it, even if it is a little scary.
Yeah. What is the best website if they would like to learn more about you and your company?
Yeah, I think my personal website's probably the best because you can kind of find everything I'm doing from there. It's just ananjayconte.com. We can link to it. I'll share it with you. I'm doing that too.
Cool. Very cool. Before I read out the paragraph to close out our podcast episode and conversation day, I just would like to take a moment to thank you for being a guest. I think that you brought incredible value. We started with the intention today of what if your legacy could be created while you're alive and could be more than what you just give your family. So this idea of impact and community and, what our assets can do for us and for the world and driving that impact. And I also just appreciated your talking about, how you focus on money, how you think about it, that it can be thought about through a multitude of ways. It just doesn't have to be fear or scarcity or survival. It can also be something that can empower people, that they can have choice. And also this idea of women making more of the decisions around it and offering them, that space that they can be brave enough to answer or ask those questions. I know that you had brought up a point before that sometimes women can be shy to ask certain questions in front of a man, if it's a male advisor.
Sure.
Yeah.
For sure. It happens all the time and it makes me really sad.
Yeah. So thank you so much for bringing your presence today to the podcast to bring new insights.
Thank you. It's my pleasure.
Okay. In closing, I'm Angelina Carleton, the hostess of the Design Your Legacy podcast, as well as the founder of Legacy Planning, a boutique advisory firm based out of Beverly Hills, California, but international in those I coach. I hope to dive deep into subjects that can help a person define, develop, and execute their legacy, and continue to scour the landscape for those who can be great resources for every dimension of your legacy. For many listeners, there can never be enough education or preparation in the moot or moat around your castle. Whether you find yourself with new wealth or generational wealth, may the content on this channel be an anchor in any storms ahead. We do our best to provide original content for your intellectual and emotional curiosity. Thank you so much for joining us today. If you're tuning in on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or SoundCloud, please remember to rate and review, share with your family and friends, leave a comment, or send one of us an email and let us know your thoughts. So thank you so much for joining us once again this week. And thank you, Anna, for speaking into your legacy.